All right, Paul, we got the Sixers and the Rockets tonight. The Rockets are the worst team in the NBA. However, it is not a night to say, it's a terrible team. This might be the most important game of the season all of a sudden. All of them are, but tonight, you cannot lose this game tonight. Mathematically, the way I look at it is you can afford to lose 2 games the rest of the way. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you go 5-2, Brooklyn would have to go undefeated. I think even if Brooklyn goes undefeated at that point, you still
they would finish tied.
5-2. Right. If you go 5-2, that's it. It's done. The magic number is 5 because they're 2 up in the loss column, and they own the tiebreaker. So I believe it's any combination of 5 wins. It's the magic number. So any combination of 5 Sixers wins and Nets losses get you there. So they're in really good shape. They're sitting really pretty, like you alluded to with this game tonight. This is one of the easier ones they have. The schedule is pretty soft in general, but to me, like it's like this: the more you win now, and the closer and the more you can wrap things up, you then dictate what you can do down the stretch. So if you want to give Joel Embiid a night off, if you want to give Tobias Harris a night off, if you want to give Seth Curry, Danny Green, if you want to give any of those guys a night off, the sooner you take care of business and win games and get closer to that, and check points off of that magic number of 5, the better off you'll be and the more control you'll have going into the final games of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was big for the Bucks to sweep that series because it puts you in a spot where the Sixers have won 5 in a row, the Bucks have won 3 in a row, so they can't gain any ground, and yet the Nets have lost ground with the 2 losses there. So the Bucks really did you a solid. But what did we take from the 2-game set between the Bucks and the Nets?
It's hard, Mike, because the Nets are still missing a pretty darn big piece with James Harden still out of the lineup. I think if anything, that's what we take away, right? Is that 1, the Nets are having an awful lot of trouble staying healthy. And 2, because of that, it's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt their cohesiveness. I saw, after the game, Steve Nash even talked about that, how they're having like problem-solving issues late in games, which is not great when you're a team that's expecting to win an NBA championship. That's not ideal to be here in May now, because now it's to the point where, the playtime is over. It's getting to the point where you have to figure these things out. There's not a whole lot of time to do it. So the Nets had 2 big games. Again, I do want to preface, no James Harden, who has been outstanding for them when he has been in the lineup, to the point where people were talking about him possibly entering the MVP race before he got hurt. But at the same time, it's clear that they have some cohesiveness issues, and that's going to be a huge benefit to the Sixers and the Bucks, who, if the Sixers get the 1 seed, inevitably it seems like the Nets and the Bucks are going to play each other. So that's setting up to be a really intriguing second-round series.
Yeah, it's funny because I went through a couple scenarios today. We've been talking about this whole play-in situation. Right now, if Philly was the 1 – you would have a spot where you could likely play Washington in round number 1, and that doesn't seem to be fun either.
No, it's really not. The Russell Westbrook trade for most of this season has looked like an absolute disaster from the Wizards' perspective, but now the guy's playing great. You got to give him his due. I mean, he's been playing really, really well. The whole team, he's really kind of willed them, put them on their backs. And then, let's not forget about Bradley Beal, who has given the Sixers fits throughout his career. So, yeah, that's not a real – listen, the Sixers would win that matchup. Like, no, in a 7-game series, the Sixers would absolutely beat the Washington Wizards. But that's not fun either. Like, that would not be a fun 7-game series to have to go with against a guy like Russell Westbrook, who is going to go 100 miles an hour and give everything he's got in a playoff series, and to also have to try to contain Bradley Beal for a 7-game series. That's not a fun scenario. With all that said, I don't see a possible scenario where the Wizards could upset them. But yeah, not fun, not ideal. But listen, it's also the playoffs, Mike. You're going to have to play tough teams. Yep. You're going to face tests along the way, and that's why you need the 1 seed, so that you're setting yourself up on a good path and quote unquote easier path to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and potentially the finals.
Yeah, I mean, you got Rockets tonight. You're off tomorrow, back home. Pelicans. All right, they gave you problems the last time. That's not a very good basketball team, though. Pistons are horrible. Pacers are playing in that play-in scenario, but they're pretty locked in there. You got the Heat and then the 2 against the Magic. So, as we said, you can afford to kind of stub your toe twice. If you only lose twice, you're in pretty good shape. So, as you mentioned, Paul, I think it's a good thing to point out. There's a good opportunity to get your guys some rest down this final stretch of games, and how important that would be playing 5 games in 7 days this week. And 2 of them that you had to kind of have a bare-knuckle fight to get through.
Right. And I think that that's what Doc Rivers, I would think, would be emphasizing. Let's just take care of this. Like, let's just get it done. Because we have this opportunity. We control everything. Like, the Sixers, like,
I will say this real quick. I will say this, Paul. I went through Brooklyn and Milwaukee's schedule. They don't play very many difficult games the rest of the way either.
Well, the Nets actually do have a couple tricky games.
They got 2, Dallas and Denver.
Yeah, so they clearly have the 2 toughest games of any of the 3 teams still on their schedule. So that's nothing to sneeze at. And is James Harden going to play again in the regular season? Like, I have my doubts. It seems like he's it's a pretty serious hamstring, and it's really lingering. So that's another big factor, I think, for the Nets. But yeah, it's like I said, it's all in their hands. The magic number is 5. Just take care of the games that you're supposed to win. Starting tonight in Houston. The Pelicans clearly. I mean, the Pelicans gave them problems in New Orleans. I think they took that team too lightly. If anything, that might bode well for the Sixers now, because all Doc Rivers has to do is point to that game in New Orleans and said, "Hey, remember when you kind of slept on this team and they punched you in the mouth and beat you?" That should be pretty easy motivation. The fact that it's at home, Mike, too, I think makes a huge difference. As you mentioned, the 5 and 7 nights, this weird, funky road trip where you went from, San Antonio to Chicago, now to Houston. I think being back home, I think they'll be refreshed, and I think they'll be in a better place. So, as long as they stay healthy through this game. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to keep saying it. It's just that they have everything right in front of them to get the 1 seed, and that's been the goal all season long. They are healthy right now. All the 5 starters are only 1 guy in the injury report tonight, and that's Furkan Korkmaz. So they are healthy, and there is just no excuse. They got to just sew this thing up as soon as possible.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've been stressing that I know this regular season is kind of boring down the stretch here, and it seems like it's like because typically we'd be playing playoff basketball by now. You'd be in round number 2 by this stage of the season, so I get it. But this is not time to start getting bored and bail on this team. They have got to tighten up and win this group of games. That being said, they've won 5 in a row. If they won out, they'd be entering the playoffs on a 12-game win streak. It's like one of those things where, like, man, you almost want to see them stub their toe at one more time here so you're not entering on a 12-game win streak, right? Or no? Go in on a 12-gamer.
I think if they go in on a 12-game win streak, I would be perfectly okay with that. Just it's good to ride that momentum. I understand what you mean. Like they haven't faced much adversity since that 4-game losing streak where, guys were in and out of the lineup. Really, in the second half, that's really the only true adversity they've really faced. They played really, really, really well in the second half of the season. So, to me, I think it's a good thing. I win as many as you can, go in on a high note, get that confidence up. The starting 5 has played really well together, keep playing really well together, and force the other teams to kind of knock your momentum off. Like you kind of already talked about the Wizards. Look how good they're playing. They might be coming into Philadelphia. If they go and they win, they're going to be coming in on a hot streak. So if you have a hot streak of your own, that's probably bodes Ben, coming in cold and having to face a team that's been playing kind of a playoff level of basketball and playing really well at that. So I would say win as many as you can. I definitely think, though, Mike, there's going to be opportunities if they take care of what they need to take care of. There's going to be opportunities to the rest guys, and I think Doc Rivers will take advantage of that because, listen, Danny Green has had a hip issue all season long that he's been kind of nursing. Seth Curry admitted to us the other night that, yeah, I feel good right now because, we blew teams out for a week and I got to not play in the fourth quarter. So that has helped me. Or we already know Joel Embiid and his injury history, and, he's still a little dinged up. Tobias Harris with the knee, he's kind of looked kind of in and out of health-wise. So I would think it would behoove them to win these games. And if we're going to say, should they go on a 12-win winning streak or rest some guys? Yeah, I think resting guys is the better scenario. But at the same time, if they can go on a winning streak, I think that would only serve them well.
Yeah, and by the way, Harris, I thought 35 minutes the other night looked more like himself. He was very efficient, 10 of 13, 21 points in the game, 9 rebounds. That was a much better feeling of like, all right, I feel better. about Harris. The one thing I'll ask is Hill in that game only played 13 minutes as a reserve. Is this a kind of a – I mean, I can't imagine this is how he's going to use the bench with Hill only 13 minutes.
I just think Doc was not pleased with the way the bench was played in the second. I mean, he said that, and it's true. I mean, I think
he's got good reason. They're up by 17. Come on, guys. Like, he said in the pregame that, I'm comfortable playing all 11 guys. That's why we don't mind playing the back-to-back. And it's like, this bench twice now has made your starters come back in the game.
Yeah, and it's funny because historically that is like a bench player weird thing on the road. If you look at like variance from benches at home versus on the road, and that's not just it's every team. Bench players tend to play better at home. Whatever the reason is, whatever the science is, I don't know, but that's just like a statistical fact. So that's part of it. These all bench lineups, and I really hope Doc Rivers just said that because he told us, he said, I'm not afraid to go to the all bench lineup if that's what you're asking. And listen, that's great that you want to pump your bench up, you want to pump your guys up, but we should not see that. That should not. You have 3 players, 2 guys that are all-stars, 1 guy that's an MVP, 1 guy that might be the defensive player of the year, and then you have another guy who's a borderline all-star. Those guys got to play 35-plus minutes a night in the playoffs. So if you do the math, and then even Danny Green, I think Danny Green's got to play 30-plus minutes a night. Seth, I think, is the only guy who I think in the starting lineup where his minutes are going to vary a little bit, depending on matchup, depending on how he's shooting, and depending on how defensively that's working out. But you have 4 guys that are going to play big, big minutes. So there is really no reason for you to go to an all-bench lineup in the postseason. I don't see it. I want to hope. I hope that Doc Rivers was really just trying to pump those bench guys up because listen, they're going to need them. There's going to be spots where George Hill or Shake Milton or Matisse Thybulle or Dwight Howard where they're going to have a moment where they're going to need one of those guys to really step up and play a big part of a game. So I understand wanting to pump them up, but at the same time, that all bench lineup to me, I mean that cannot happen in the postseason.
Yeah, although I go back to when I was a kid and the Sixers had Barkley, Mahorn, Dawkins, Hawkins, and Jaminski. They played 1 guy off the bench. They played Ron Anderson, and that was it. You couldn't name the next guy. So you're right. Like these starters, you get to the playoffs, it's almost like you got to go in with the mindset that I'm playing the full 48, and if I get 6 to 8 minutes to sit, that's great.
I think once they get to the second round, I think that's when you're going to see like Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons. They're going to average around 40 minutes in the second round. They almost have to. They're your 3 best players, so they have to play those big minutes. And as I mentioned before, I think Danny Green, how valuable he's proven himself to be, I think he's got to play.
But at least for him, you have a guy that can come in and give you a good, solid 15 minutes of defense playing Thybulle.
Oh, 100%. And then George Hill also, plays solid defense, gives you extra ball handling, and can shoot the basketball. And Shake Milton can get hot. Shake Milton, I think too, that's the other thing I think about with like a guy like Shake Milton, who has played predominantly in all bench lineups. I think he can be better when he's mixed in with starting caliber players. And we've kind of seen that when he's played with with Ben Simmons or with Joel Embiid.
The problem is
elevated his game, which isn't rocket science. It's just when you're playing with better players, you play better.
Yeah, it's just the problem has been Hill came back and Simmons was out, and so they haven't got the chance to really, I guess, utilize that. The one last thing, Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers at Paul Hudrick tonight. They take on the worst team in the league, the Rockets. And they are legitimately the worst team record-wise.
And banged up, too.
Yeah, record-wise and aesthetically. They are bad. Is Joel Embiid coming out the other night and saying, he wants to work on passing out the doubles. And it almost felt like he was forcing himself to pass on some of the – didn't you feel that way?
No, I thought his comments were really interesting and really honest, very candid, basically saying – I'm good. I know I'm good. When I get to the playoffs, I know I'm going to be able to drop 30 points a game. What we need is I need to get Tobias Harris going. I need to get Ben Simmons going. I need Seth Curry and Danny Green to shoot the lights out. And I need to be able to find them because, and I do feel I felt like the San Antonio game, the reason he scored a lot in that game is because they needed him to, because, the other guys weren't playing that well. And he sensed it. And he kind of got going.
Yeah.
The Bulls game, when he got in, listen, Tobias played really well in that fourth quarter. The other guys were hitting. Seth Curry and Danny Green were both hitting. against Chicago. So Joel Embiid didn't have to kind of assert his will and score. And I think, as weird as it sounds, Mike, I'm on board with it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we all know what Joel Embiid is. We know how dominant he can be when he's on. He's a legit MVP caliber player. So, like he said, they're going to aggressively double, triple, whatever team, in the playoffs. That's going to happen every single night. So for him to kind of have that level of thinking, to be like, you know what? Let me almost work on this now, and let me get these guys confident and feeling good, so that when we're in the playoffs, I feel good to get those guys the ball, and those guys feel good that when they have the ball, they can score. So it was candid. Maybe some people don't like it. Maybe some people view it as, he's kind of taking it easy, but I'm on board with it. I think it's smart, and it's also putting less of a burden on him from a health perspective, but he's also still playing, if that makes sense. So he's keeping himself in shape. He's staying on the floor, but he's not overexerting himself. So he still has stuff left in the tank.
And what I think it also shows, Paul, is he has a level of confidence in the surrounding guys where he says, you know what, I want to throw that pass because I know that Danny Green can make that shot and Seth Curry can make that shot and Tobias Harris. Where in the past, I have to force something because I'm not so sure Josh Richardson or Al Horford are making that shot. So I think that's another level of confidence that he has in this roster that he's, a part of now, which is good.
100%. He said that, really, I think maybe even in the first or second week of the season, he said that he already felt better about, when I get double teamed, I got guys that I know are going to make shots. You mentioned, Seth Curry, the ridiculous start he got off to. I'm sure that felt really good. And I think too, Mike, Seth Curry has been very up and down, and shooters kind of traditionally are, right? I mean, they go through stretches where they're on fire, feels like they can't miss, and then they go through slumps. But I do think a part of Seth's issues have been, the bout with COVID, where he really struggled to kind of get his wind back and really get back into good cardio shape. And then he had, a leg injury. He had the ankle injury and then the hip in the same leg, which I'm sure was a kind of a compensation injury. So I just think it's been a combination for him where he just hasn't been 100% healthy. So you see when he is healthy, how good he can be and how dynamic he kind of makes their offense. Not just for Joel Embiid, but for Ben Simmons as well. You see that two-man game kind of developing. You saw the one play in Chicago was one of their prettier plays of the season, where it was kind of a give-and-go situation with him and Ben Simmons, and he finds Ben Simmons for that lob. So, I think 100% Joel Embiid, of all the years he has felt good about his supporting cast, there's no question to me he feels more confident this season than he ever has.
He's Paul Hudrick, at Paul Hudrick, and the Sixers take the Rockets on tonight. Pelicans Friday, Pistons on Saturday. So we got a bunch to discuss the rest of this week during Inside the Sixers. Paul will be back on Friday, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Paul Hudrick, you look good, man.
I'm doing my best, Mike.
Appreciate it, bud. Yeah, man. All right, let's go and take a look at that tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. That game's tip-off coverage begins at 8 p.m. And, of course, Tom McGinnis on the call. The great Tom McGinnis